Hello, dear YouTube viewers. I hope you're doing well. Okay, so let's start our video. The phone buzzed in his hand, a soft vibration that usually brought excitement or comfort, but this time it carried a weight he hadn't felt before. He unlocked the screen, expecting a routine message, maybe something playful or affectionate, but instead he read the words that froze his breath. Going on a trip with my ex. Don't be jealous. For a moment, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, that maybe he was misreading, but the sentence stood there, plain and unapologetic. His heart sank, then flared with a rush of anger and confusion. How could she send something like that so casually, as if she were mentioning what she planned to eat for lunch? The emotions crashed together inside him. Shock, disbelief, and the sting of betrayal, leaving him unable to move for several seconds. His fingers trembled as he held the phone, not from weakness, but from the storm gathering inside him. His mind screamed to reply with anger, to demand answers, to unleash all the pain that burned in his chest. Yet, when he finally typed back, his words came out sharp, calm, and final. Don't worry, you won't see me again. He stared at the sentence for a long moment before pressing send. It was short, but it carried the weight of everything he had been holding inside. There was no begging, no pleading, no desperate attempt to keep her. Just dignity wrapped in quiet devastation. After the message left his phone, silence surrounded him. The storm inside didn't calm. It grew louder. His chest tightened. His pulse thudded in his ears. He replayed the months, the years, the moments that had made him believe in their love. Laughter in quiet restaurants. Long drives where their hands never separated. Late-night talks where she swore he was the only one. Were those lies? Or had she simply changed, slowly drifting back toward the comfort of someone she once knew? His mind searched for answers that weren't coming. Memories flashed one after another, each more painful than the last. The way she used to lean her head on his shoulder during movies. The way she once said, "You make me feel safe." The messages she used to send him, random good mornings, little updates about her day. All those gestures that once felt like love now felt hollow, like cheap decorations hiding cracks in the walls. He wondered if he had missed the signs, if the truth had been there all along, waiting for him to open his eyes. Maybe the late replies, the sudden mood shifts, the excuses about being busy. Were they warnings he had ignored because he wanted so badly to believe in her? The questions twisted inside him, each one heavier than the last. Was I blind? Was I not enough? Or was she always waiting for him, the ex who never truly left her heart? The thought cut deeper than any sharp word could. The longer he sat in silence, the clearer something became. This wasn't love anymore. Love doesn't announce trips with an ex like it's nothing. Love doesn't test your patience with disrespect disguised as honesty. Love doesn't strip you of dignity and expect you to smile through the pain. The truth was bitter, but it was standing in front of him now, undeniable. He put the phone down on the table, his hands still shaking slightly. A numb calm began to replace the chaos in his chest. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the beginning of something different, clarity. He realized in that moment that the version of love he had held onto was already gone. All that remained was a decision, to hold on to an illusion or to walk away with the only thing he had left, his self-respect. She stood by the doorway, arms folded, voice casual but carrying a sharp edge as she said, "It's just a friendly trip, nothing serious. You're overreacting." The words hit him like a cold wind, and yet he didn't flinch. Instead, he watched her carefully, noticing the way her eyes shifted slightly, the way her tone tried too hard to sound dismissive. Something in that effort told him, more than the words themselves, she wasn't being honest, not with him, and maybe not even with herself. He took a slow breath, keeping his voice calm. steady, almost too measured for the storm still circling inside him. If it really meant nothing, he said, eyes fixed on her, then why did you tell me not to be jealous? The question hung in the air like a blade, sharp and undeniable. Her face stiffened, the practiced nonchalance cracking for just a second before she turned defensive. She muttered something about him, reading too much into it, about him twisting her words. But he saw it, saw the flicker of guilt, the shadow of truth in her hesitation. The room grew heavier as silence pressed between them. He realized then what she was trying so hard to hide. She still carried feelings for the man she once loved. Whether it was longing, regret, or unfinished business, it didn't matter. What mattered was that it lived inside her, and she hadn't been honest about it. That truth burned in his chest, sharper than the message itself. The argument erupted like a dam breaking. Her voice rose, sharp and defensive. You're being insecure. Not every decision I make revolves around you. You always think the worst of me. Her words carried anger, but also the desperation of someone who knew she'd been caught in her own contradictions. His response was calm but heavy with conviction. This isn't about insecurity. This is about respect, loyalty, trust, things you promised when you chose to be with me. If you can so easily run back to the past, then what was I to you? A placeholder until the moment you felt like testing me? She scoffed, shaking her head, but he pressed on, his tone low and unwavering. I don't need excuses. I don't need explanations twisted to make me the villain. All I need to know is what I already see. You've made your choice, and I refuse to keep begging for scraps of love while you keep your heart elsewhere. The finality in his voice unsettled her. For once, she didn't have a comeback. Her lips parted, but no words came, only silence. She looked at him as though seeing a version of him she hadn't expected. Someone who wasn't going to bend this time. Someone who had finally drawn the line. That was the moment the decision solidified inside him. He wasn't going to fight for a love that no longer fought for him. He wasn't going to cling to a promise that she had already broken in her heart. Without another word, he walked past her and into their shared room. The sound of drawers opening, zippers sliding, and clothes being folded filled the silence. His hands moved steadily. Each item he packed a small piece of closure. She lingered by the doorway, occasionally saying his name, sometimes trying to soften her voice. But he didn't stop. He didn't argue anymore. The fight was over, not because she had won, but because he was done playing the game. When the bag was nearly full, his eyes drifted to the nightstand where a framed photo rested. It was of the two of them, smiling, arms around each other, taken on a trip where everything still felt right. He paused, staring at it for a long moment. He could have taken it, could have buried the memory in his luggage, but instead he left it exactly where it stood. The photo belonged to a version of them that no longer existed, and he wasn't going to carry ghosts with him. He zipped the bag shut, the sound cutting through the silence like a closing chapter. Slinging it over his shoulder, he walked toward the door without looking back at her. The weight in his chest was still there, but beneath it grew something steadier, resolve. He wasn't leaving in defeat. He was leaving with his dignity intact. As he stepped outside, the cool air hit his face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he breathed deeply. It wasn't freedom yet, not fully, but it was the first step toward it. The hotel room was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against his chest until breathing felt like work. He sat on the edge of the bed, his bag tossed carelessly into the corner, and stared at the bland beige wall as if it might give him answers. The world outside buzzed with traffic and life, but inside this small square of a room, everything felt hollow. He had never imagined that his love story, the one he once thought would last forever, would end with him dragging a suitcase out of his own home. That night, the loneliness struck in waves. First, it was disbelief, a stubborn hope that maybe he'd wake up tomorrow and realize it was just a nightmare. Then it was anger, a sharp ache in his chest that made him want to smash something, scream until the walls shook. But anger gave way to sorrow, the heavy kind that seeped into every corner of him. He buried his face in his hands and whispered into the darkness, "How did my love story become this?" Hours later, when sleep refused to come, he pulled out a notebook from his bag and opened it on the desk by the window. The pages stared back at him, empty but waiting. His pen hovered, then finally moved. The words poured out raw and unfiltered, about betrayal, about the illusion of love, about how respect should never be optional in a relationship. He paused at one line, reading it aloud softly as though to convince himself, "Respect is worth more than false love." He underlined it twice, the ink pressing deep into the paper. That sentence became a kind of anchor, a reminder that walking away wasn't weakness. It was survival. The following days blurred together, but one thing kept him afloat: the people who refused to let him drown. His closest friends showed up, not with pity, but with understanding. One dragged him out for coffee. Another made him laugh with old memories. And yet another simply sat in silence, offering presence instead of words. His family called often, each voice a reminder that he wasn't alone, even if it felt like it at night. Over dinner one evening, his oldest friend leaned across the table and said, "Betrayal doesn't define you. It defines the person who chose it. Don't carry her sins on your back." The words hit deep, cutting through the fog of hurt. Another friend added, "Moving on isn't about pretending it didn't happen. It's about refusing to let it hold you hostage." He listened, grateful but quiet, letting their words sink in. Piece by piece, their support began stitching together the parts of him that felt torn open. It didn't erase the pain, but it reminded him that he was more than the betrayal, more than the broken relationship. But healing was never a straight line. One evening, scrolling through his phone out of habit, he made the mistake of opening her profile. The sight of her laughing in photos, standing too close to her ex on that trip she had so casually announced, made his stomach twist. There she was, looking carefree, as though their years together had never mattered, as though he had been nothing more than a chapter she'd already forgotten. For a moment, the hurt burned fresh, as if the wound had been reopened. His chest tightened, and he nearly threw the phone aside. Yet, as he stared a little longer, something unexpected surfaced. Relief. It was painful, yes, but it was also liberating. There was no more pretending, no more gray area. She had revealed exactly who she was, and in doing so, she freed him from the weight of doubt. He whispered to himself, almost like a vow, "She revealed who she really is." And with those words, a strange calm settled over him. The images that once would have shattered him now became proof that he had been right to walk away, proof that he had chosen dignity over humiliation, proof that he could finally let go. That night, as he closed his eyes in the unfamiliar bed of the hotel, the loneliness was still there, but so was something else, the faint but undeniable beginning of strength. The road ahead was long, but he was already on it. The first weeks after leaving her felt like walking through fog, every step heavy, every breath laced with echoes of what had been. But slowly, as the days stretched into weeks, he began to search for something beyond the pain. He started with the gym, a place he had once treated as optional, but now embraced like a lifeline. The first session left his muscles aching, his lungs burning, but the sweat was cleansing. Each drop felt like a piece of grief, leaving his body. Soon, he began to crave the rhythm of it, the pounding of his shoes on the treadmill, the steady repetition of weights, the slow but visible growth of strength. The anger that once consumed him became fuel, reshaped into determination. Work followed the same path. Where once he had been distracted, mind drifting back to her texts and moods. He now poured himself into projects. Colleagues noticed the change. He stayed later, focused harder, and for the first time in months, he felt proud of himself instead of drained. Success at work wasn't just professional, it was personal redemption. Beyond the gym and work, he allowed himself to explore parts of life he had neglected. He picked up books again, losing himself in stories that transported him far from his own. He booked a short trip on his own, traveling to a city he'd always wanted to see, and wandered through its streets with nothing but a camera slung around his neck. Photography became more than a hobby, it became a way of seeing the world anew. Each photo captured not just places and people, but the reminder that beauty still existed, even in the aftermath of heartbreak. Slowly, his transformation unfolded. The raw anger dulled into strength, and strength softened into a surprising peace. One evening, as he sat on a park bench reviewing the photos he had taken that day, sunsets, strangers laughing, children chasing pigeons, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: gratitude. Not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it had forced upon him. Without it, he might still have been trapped in a love that asked him to shrink himself, to accept humiliation disguised as compromise. The lesson settled into him gradually but firmly. Love should never come with humiliation. A relationship that made him question his worth wasn't love, it was dependency, illusion, or worse, manipulation. He realized the importance of boundaries, of saying no when respect was missing, of valuing himself enough to walk away. Self-respect, he understood now, was not negotiable. It was the foundation of everything. Months passed, and the man who once walked out of his home with shaking hands was no longer the same. He carried himself differently now. Head higher, steps steadier, eyes clearer. Healing hadn't erased the scars, but it had taught him how to live with them, even how to let them guide him towards something better. Then, one afternoon in early autumn, fate staged its own cruel twist. He was leaving a bookstore downtown, camera bag slung casually across his shoulder, when he saw her. She stood across the street, laughing at something a friend had said, her hair catching the sunlight. For a split second, time folded in on itself, and he was back in the days when her smile was everything to him. But as quickly as the memory came, it dissolved. She noticed him. Their eyes met, and her laughter faltered. She froze, her smile slipping into something else, surprise, maybe even regret. There was a flicker in her gaze, like she was searching for something familiar in him. But he wasn't the same man she had left. He offered her a polite nod, nothing more. No bitterness, no longing, just acknowledgement. Then he walked on, his pace steady, his chest calm. Behind him, he could almost feel her watching, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. For him, that moment wasn't about revenge or validation. It was about proof. Proof that he had healed enough to face her without breaking. Proof that her choices no longer held power over him. Proof that he had finally stepped into the version of himself who valued peace over pain. As he turned the corner and disappeared from her sight, a faint smile tugged at his lips. The journey had been brutal, but it had carried him here, to strength, to dignity, to freedom. The night was quiet, the kind of stillness that once would have driven him into restless thoughts of her, waiting for a message, replaying old arguments, wondering what she was doing. But now, lying in his own bed in a place that finally felt like home, he felt no such pull. Instead, his mind drifted to everything he had endured and everything he had overcome. "She thought I'd beg," he whispered to himself, the words carrying no bitterness, just certainty. Instead, I walked away. The memory of her smirk, her casual dismissal, her attempts to make him feel small, they no longer cut him open. If anything, they reminded him of how much stronger he had become. The heartbreak that once felt like it would end him had turned into something unexpected: liberation. He thought about the man he had been, desperate for reassurance, clinging to promises that were never honored, willing to shrink himself just to keep her happy. And he thought about the man he was now, disciplined, grounded, no longer willing to barter his dignity for affection. Heartbreak had been his teacher, and though the lessons had been brutal, they had also been necessary. As he reflected, he found himself shaping his thoughts into truths, words that others might need to hear. Love without respect is just a cage. He had lived inside that cage, mistaking the bars for safety, until he realized they were only keeping him trapped. Another truth echoed in his mind, one he knew now with unshakable certainty. Sometimes losing them is the only way to find yourself. If someone had told him months ago that he would one day be grateful for the pain, he would have laughed in their face. But sitting there now, calm and whole, he could see it clearly. The betrayal had stripped away illusions, forcing him to confront reality and choose himself. Without it, he might still be sleepwalking through a life built on lies. His phone lay on the nightstand. Once, it had been an object of torment, every buzz, every notification carrying the weight of hope and dread. Now it was silent, and he no longer cared. He didn't wait for her calls, didn't check to see if her name might appear on the screen. That part of his life was over. He had deleted her number not in anger, but in acceptance. A faint smile tugged at his lips as he thought of the future. For the first time in a long while, the horizon felt wide open. He wasn't rushing to fill the emptiness with someone new, nor was he clinging to the past. Instead, he was embracing the journey of becoming stronger, wiser, freer. He rose from the bed and stepped onto the balcony, the night air cool against his skin. The city stretched out below, lights blinking like distant stars, each one a reminder that life went on. And so would he. He inhaled deeply, the air filling his lungs not with sorrow, but with promise. The chapter was closed. The story wasn't about her anymore. It was about him, about growth, dignity, and the courage to walk away when love turned into chains. He had survived the storm, and now he was stepping into clear skies. And for the first time in a long time, he felt entirely at peace. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe. Our channel, Awesome Visual Story.